Now, our topic is about stress, and stress comes in all kinds of ways and shapes, as well as burnout and zoning out. Those are the types of things that happen to us at work. And stress, especially, can really kind of be sneaky and take some time to kind of come into our lives. So, I'd like to invite as Dr. Siata Wallace to come in and talk to us about stress. And we'll start out with asking the question of how can stress creep into our daily lives?
Mhm. Well, stress is something that we are all very familiar with, I'm sure. You may have experienced stress in terms of having like a real serious situation happen in your life. It could be an accident, it could be an illness, it could be a death of a loved one. And those are things that we all know and recognize or we're dealing with stress. But there are times when stress is happening and we're not really aware of what those things are. And that could be that you have a lot of deadlines at work. It could be that maybe you have a child and the child is going through, either a tantrum or maybe they're a teenager and they're grumpy all the time. It could be that you have um, strained relationships with people at your job or some friends that maybe you're not as close as you used to be. And these are little things that creep in. They may not be major things, but they creep in daily. And then on top of that, we have all of the societal stresses that, things that are on the news. We may have things that have to do with social media, whatever it is that you might be taking in or comments that you're seeing. And these things, they add up. So they're like tiny little slices that kind of cut you up on a regular basis. And then before you know it, you're, you know, all the way up in terms of your stress level.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that story about the frog putting a frog in water and then starting, put the heat on, and the frog isn't aware of that it's getting hot. And that's kind of like what you're talking about, what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's jump into the STEM careers. Why is STEM careers? What makes it so particularly challenging, especially when it comes to stress and burnout?
Mhm. Well, STEM, I think, generally tends to be the type of career where you're very committed to what it is that you're doing. Because so much of what we do in STEM is to help to solve problems and big problems, right? And so a lot of times we're committed to making sure that what we're doing is going to help other people. And so that means that um, it's something that you feel very responsible for a lot of the time. And so that is one area where the stress can come up. It's a good kind of stress, right? You care a lot, you're motivated, but it still can add a little extra to what it is that you're feeling, the pressure that you have on yourself. And then, in addition to that, because we are solving a lot of big problems, there tend to be some significant timelines, whether it is that the project needs to happen very quickly, or that if you don't have that much wiggle room to miss deadlines because they're so important in terms of meeting those particular timelines. And so the work environment can be very stressful because of that, because it's not sort of like, oh, we can wait till next year to be able to, make sure that someone doesn't have a cure for a disease. No matter how long it takes, everyone is really committed to making sure that they can do these things as quickly as possible. If you work in a job where, let's say, you're doing technology related, and there's lots of bugs that you're trying to fix, those the pressures there because nobody wants their software or their technology to not be working. So there's always the type of pressure in terms of the job getting the job done. And then on top of that, there is the culture in STEM, which when you start a STEM career, whether you started when you were a child or whether you made a transition as an adult, you start to recognize that the culture is very much so about you have to really work really hard and everybody needs to be focused and committed and do whatever needs to be done to get the job done. And if you can't hack it, then you're not meant to be in this career, right? It's a very hard driving type of culture in a lot of places. You know, there might be small pockets where that's not the culture, but for the most part, that is the culture. And so all of those things kind of add up to it being like extraordinarily stressful for everyone. And then on top of that, for women, we have all of the other challenges and barriers that help to make it even more pressured, and for people to feel like they have to do more in order to either prove themselves or in order to even be seen and heard in the environment.
Yeah, yeah, they're women in STEM have some really significant additional stressors that happen that maybe some other women don't experience in their workplace. Now, the title was burnout, and we talked about it had burnout, it had stress out, it had zone out. But how is burnout different from stress and depression?
Mhm. Yeah, you know, the term burnout is getting a lot of play these days because a lot of people do feel that way. We went through quite a lot of things in the last couple of years. For those that are, watching this live or in recent times. Um, and so a lot of people just felt really stressed out because of everything that was happening with the pandemic and afterwards. And so a lot of times people just kind of going through the motions. And then when things started to get back to normal, and there wasn't a period where people could recuperate or heal from whatever they experienced, some people hit a wall. A lot of people hit a wall. And even though people have hit a lot of walls in the past, we're seeing, millions of people around the world did it at the same time. And so that term burnout became very popular. It became more of a cultural term that people understand when it's like, you know what, I just can't do another thing. I can't get up. I can't get moving. I can't move. I don't want to move. And that is when you have basically stretched yourself to the max and your body and your mind can't do anymore. That's very different from depression, although the feelings may be a little bit of the same. Whereas in depression, it's not so much that you stretch yourself to the max, it's just that you're in a state in terms of mental health wise, that has to do with your brain chemistry that makes you feel like you can't do anymore and makes you feel like you don't want to do anymore. It has not necessarily anything to do with how much productivity you've been involved with. It's much more of a chemical imbalance that someone may be experiencing that makes you feel that way. Whereas the burnout is that you've just done too much for too long and your body cannot take it anymore. So that is the difference. And both of them will require a different type of approach.
Yeah, yeah, burnout is probably the most severe out of the three that we mentioned. And it is debilitating to people. It's just kind of you can't function, you
Mhm,
can't think, you can't. Yeah. There are some, like you said, there's some aspects of depression in it, but it's to the point where you're just physically and mentally and emotionally exhausted.
mhm,
Um, so it since it's so difficult and to go through that and so debilitating, how does someone avoid burnout?
mhm. That is the key, right? Because once you get to the burnout, there's really not much that you're going to feel or be able to do, except to crawl yourself out of it bit by bit. So the solution, I want to make sure I put that up front. The solution for burnout is to not do anything. For again, get as much rest as you can until you have enough energy to get the support that you need. Because a lot of times people don't realize that in order to go to counseling, to therapy, to get any type of nutrition support or any other type of physical treatment, you do have to have some energy to be able to commit to the things that you have to do, show up for the appointments, eat the right foods, go shopping, etc. And so the first line would be just lay down and rest your mind, your body, um, for as long as you can until you have the little bit of strength to commit to the other things to get yourself fully out of burnout. But we're trying to avoid it. And the best thing to do is, first of all, to really know yourself. Like, what does it feel like when you're starting to get a little bit stressed? And this is the thing that I think a lot of people miss because we're always rushing around, that we may not even know when our bodies or our minds tell us that we're stressed out. So it could be that you start to get a little bit tense. So for myself, for example, I get a little bit tense in my shoulders, which my massage therapist would tell you for sure. Or sometimes I may just feel like I'm a little bit like rushed in my thinking, just a little bit rushed. And so that's something that over time I've kind of realized, okay, yes, my shoulders are a little bit tighter as I'm sitting or I'm standing. I'll notice that I'm just not as loose, or I'll notice maybe that I'm not breathing as deeply as I normally would. And those are really tiny, tiny symptoms. But what they do is they let me know I'm probably supposed to be calming down or doing something to de-stress myself at some point during the day. Because what happens is if I ignore my stiff shoulders, or if I ignore the fact that I'm thinking a little bit quickly and kind of rushing through my thoughts, then the next day and the next day it piles up, and then it starts to be more, in my experience for myself, it starts to be a little bit more, I would say, aggressive in the sense of, then maybe instead of my thoughts being rushed, my thoughts may be a little bit more like harsh, either with myself or with other people, that I may realize, oh, I'm a little bit snappy, or I'm a little bit less patient than I normally would be. Or I may notice that my back is starting to hurt, right? And that is another sign that I waited too long to notice the other little small ones. So that's the important thing. To avoid it, you have to notice it. And then the key is you got to do something about it, right? You have to actually incorporate things in your day that allow you to de-stress. And those things can be really tiny little actions every day.
Yeah, I also get the shoulders and the neck.
Mhm,
So yes, my chiropractor can tell you about that too, where I feel like my shoulders are all the way up here, So and then it's like thinking about moving your shoulders down. Just even that takes some effort and thought that goes into it. Also, like you said, those tiny little things to kind of bring into your work life and your schedule, like going for a walk,
mhm,
listening to a podcast, or listening to a book, and taking that time. There's so much, I know, and you probably know this as well. There's so much research about those little things can make such a big difference in
mhm,
the long run.
mhm,
So, we are talking about women that are in these very hectic positions and they have to meet these deadlines. And so it's always like you feel like you never have enough time. So,
mhm,
how can time management help alleviate that stress?
mhm. Well, so the first thing I want to say is you're so right about the research and how not only important it is, but how effective it is for those small things to actually reduce stress. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that it really doesn't require that much. It really is a small gesture. Now, if you want to do something grand, that's fantastic. We talked about massage therapy and chiropractors, and those are nice things to do, but that's actually not what we're talking about. We're talking about just daily things that you can do on a regular basis. And the reason why it works in the small bits is because they are regular practices. So we're talking 5 minutes of time. Um, even if you don't have, 30 minutes for an entire podcast. You could do a 5 minute something, a 5 minute inspirational uh, conversation, or a song that you really like to listen to, or some classical music in the background. If you're not able to go for a walk, you can get up and do a couple of stretches as you're deep breathing. You can, if you can't get in nature, because people talk about that all the time, you could stare out of the window if you happen to have nature somewhere out of your window, if you have a window at work or at home. Or you could stare at a beautiful photo that makes you smile, right? So we're not talking about things that are going to require so much that you're not able to do it. It's really more about you committing to yourself that you're going to take those few minutes throughout your day to make sure that you're bringing yourself back down to a more calm baseline. That baseline is really important. So I think, time management is really important, and I want to talk about that, but I wanted to make sure that people understood that we're not asking for too much of your time for the ability to move in those stress management tools. A breath could take less than a minute.
Yeah. Wow, thank you. And thank you for really kind of going deeper into that. I
Mhm,
appreciate it. So
mhm.
yeah, and then again, that comes down to the time management, which
Yes.
we're also going to move into, because we have to make those time. Even if it's setting your iPhone to ring, to say, okay, you've now worked for 25 minutes, an hour, get up and stretch for 2 minutes. I mean, those are all important, but they're actually how you're managing your time and your day. So can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm happy to. Um, the number one thing about time management is valuing yourself, right? So the only way the time management is actually going to work is if you value yourself enough to know that you have to commit to whatever it is that you put in place. No one is determining for you what that management tool could be. Or I'm talking about your life, not at work. They may have tools at work that you have to use, but in your whole life, you can create a management tool that works for you, that speaks to you. There are all sorts of really fancy and complex ones out there. But there's also some simple things, just thinking about what your priorities are for your life right now and where they kind of fall in terms of order. So for yourself, it could be that right now in your life, you may be caretaking for a family member that's an elder, and that's a priority for you. And so that might be different from somebody else whose priority could be that they want to travel and see the world more. And so those things would make you plan out your day and your months very differently. So I think it's really important that we prioritize number one, committing to yourself. Number two, determining exactly what your values are. And because you are committing to yourself, you don't feel bad about having those values. You have to be very firm within yourself about what those values are, so that when you get to the third piece, which is saying no and creating the boundaries in your time management system, it doesn't mess with your head, because a lot of times people miss that step one and that step two. And then when it's time to actually execute the no and the boundaries, it doesn't work, because somebody will ask you, oh, well, can we, have a dinner conversation at 7 p.m. tomorrow? And that's the time that you set aside to take care of your family member, that you usually have dinner with them. That's not the boundary, right? If you say yes, if you have committed that I want to make sure that I'm caretaking for my family, and that includes making sure I'm spending time with them, then the no becomes easier. And that allows you to be less stressed because you have created the boundary, and that you have scheduled the time, and that you are able to live your life according to those values, right? And so that's definitely a key, is having the values, having the priorities, saying no. And then when you're thinking about your time management tool, you want to be very realistic about how much time you actually really have to offer. And when I say offer, I mean including work. Because I know at work sometimes it may seem like your offering is 24/7, but it's not. It's really not. And you can determine for yourself what those time frames are and then work around that and get very real about what you can do, what you have to say no to, and what you have to delegate to either someone else or another time. And I know we've heard this so many times before. I even go through this with myself. Um, but it doesn't work any other way, right? Because we've only got 24 hours a day, that you do have to feel okay about the no, because then that's just adding more stress onto you and pressure onto you if you don't just let it go. You said no, no guilt, no shame. This is what I'm doing to care for myself and my priorities.
Oh, boundaries are so critical. Thank you for bringing that up,
Yeah.
and setting them, because in this crazy world that we live in, people sometimes expect you to answer an email, at 10 o'clock at night when you're kind of taking that time to relax. So
Mhm.
thank you. And then it's also about keeping your energy level up and recognizing that you have to recharge. So what are some simple ways that you can mention about keeping that energy up and being energized when you come into a workplace or even at
Yes.
home? Yeah.
Yes, very important, because people don't understand sometimes it's not about just doing nothing so that you're rested. It's more about doing things that are going to fill you back up. So, for myself, like I mentioned, I love to listen to music. So I will turn on some music if I have an opportunity in the background, or if I'm on my way to work, I'll make sure I'm listening to something that makes me feel good. It could obviously eating nutritious food that you enjoy, to get that energy from the food. Um, Also, exercise, of course, everyone has something that they can do that they might like to enjoy exercise wise. It could be riding a bike, it could be working out in a gym class, it could be martial arts, it could be rock climbing, you name it, you pick your thing in terms of getting your energy back up. But it could also be spending time with family and friends and laughing with them. It could be, the other day I just said, you know what? I know that I need a moment, and I took a moment and I watched a holiday movie. It's not the holidays yet, but I watched one anyway, and it was great. It was a good. It lasted me. It gave me energized me for a really long time. And sometimes you just need to do that. So sometimes you break to increase the energy, and then other times you just fold in those energizing things throughout your day. But if you forget about them, what ends up happening is then your tank is just running low. It's running low day in, day out. So you have to keep filling it up. You people always talk about filling up your cup, and that's what they're talking about. Finding out for you what it is that fills you up. And again, we're not talking something extravagant. This could be, your favorite smoothie. I love sparkling water, so believe it or not, that's an energizing thing for me, putting it in my favorite glass and having some sparkling water. Those little things, they add up.
Yeah. So if you could just say, okay, here's two things that you could do right away, what would those two things be?
hmm The number one thing I would say is find out what it is that fills your cup. Just jot down two things that fill your cup and make sure that you add it to your calendar weekly. And again, they're small things. They don't have to be big things. They can take 5 minutes, but add it to your calendar. We'll start off with weekly, and then we'll try to get you up to every day to adding those things into your day. And the second thing is something called the 10-10-10 rule, which was developed by Susie Welch. And this is the idea that when you're thinking about whether to say yes or no to something, to think about it in terms of how it would impact me and the people that I care about in 10 years, in 10 months, and in 10 days. Because sometimes when we make decisions, we're just thinking about the right now and we're not panning out to the future. And we might realize, you know what, it's not going to make a difference at all. Why am I even thinking about doing this? Or you may realize, wow, it doesn't make a difference now, but in 10 years, this is really important. So I think those two things are really good tips in terms of one, for you to be able to get your energy up, and the other one is in terms of getting your boundaries and your walls up to make sure that you're protecting your time.
Oh, great. I love it. I love the 10-10. That's great. I'm going to use that for
Yeah,
sure.
good.
So I know you have a resource that you would like to share with our audience. So why don't you tell us a little more on that?
Sure. So I created a journal for women in STEM, and the journal is really an opportunity for you to be able to reflect on some of the things that are sort of value-based around your life and why it is that you even got into the career in STEM. And it's an opportunity for you to be able to get inspiration and to reflect on what it is that you can contribute to STEM. The journal itself, it has 12 themes. So you can go through each one of those themes. We have quotes in there and questions that reflection questions that can help you think about some of the topics. There's definitely one on self-care for sure. I have other ones on teamwork and other ones on things like celebrating yourself. And these were all sort of foundational things that I learned over my journey as a woman in STEM that I felt were really important for me in terms of developing my career and also the women that I helped to mentor in my work. And so I thought to put together a nice tool that you can use, and hopefully that'll be part of your energizing moments on a daily basis to go through the journal and help you really feel supported along the way.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Siata. I really appreciate your sharing the wisdom and
Thank you.
thank you.